I'm going to be taking you through a demonstration of the Archway Clamping System by R&R Clamp. Simply put, this system allows you to combine slats of material to create custom curves for extension jambs, window or door trim, railings, rocking chairs, the kind of things you always wanted to create but never could because you were stuck clamping in a straight line. You're really only limited by your imagination and the number of clamps you have available to you. The Archway system doesn't require a table of its own. It's portable, so you can use it pretty much anywhere. You could even take it to a job site and fasten it directly to the subfloor to create the arch right there on the spot. There are two sizes of Archway clamps available. Our 4.5-inch model works great for trim pieces and most extension jambs. For creating deeper extensions or other laminate objects like extra wide sled runners, for example, you want to go for our 6-inch model to make use of the taller jaws. Today I'll be using the 4.5-inch model to create an arch to match an existing curved window. Let me show you. When choosing a stock, be sure to double the width of the finished piece you'll need. You'll use a table saw to rip the stock into flexible strips, so we need to account for all those blade widths. The thickness of the strips is going to depend on the type of wood you're using, but a good rule of thumb is to stay between 1/8 and 5/16 of an inch. Before we rip the stock, we mark it with a V. This way we can realign the slats in the correct order and orientation, and be sure the grain matches properly in the finished piece. This is a piece we created earlier. Once it's milled and finished, it looks like solid stock. We define the arch by tracing our custom template curve directly onto the 3/4 inch backing sheet. Arcs, parabolas, and compound curves are the three types that you'll run into when you're clamping. For our purposes, arcs can be defined as portions of the curve of a perfect circle. This means that any point along that arc is going to be equidistant, the same distance from a center point. More relevant from a clamping standpoint is the fact that any clamp positioned along an arc should be oriented toward a single point, which is to say that if you took a line of sight down the clamp, all of them would have the same point in common. A parabola is a curve that changes from point to point, meaning that the curve here is different than the curve here. Since the curve of a parabola changes as it goes, there's no reliable center point to which you can orient all of the clamps. Best rule of thumb is to clamp perpendicular to the path of the parabola. A compound curve is really two distinct curves with two different orientations. In this compound curve, the bottom half is curved around this area, and the top half you can see is curved around this area. Any compound path is going to have something called an inflection point, which is basically the point at which the curve changes orientations from one direction to the next. When clamping a compound curve, your clamps are going to have to flip to the other side of the piece as you pass the inflection point. Keeping in mind that we want to space the clamps evenly, arrange the archway system so that the appropriate edge aligns with your finished product. In this example, we happen to be using the line as a reference for the inside edge of our trim piece, so we'll eye up each clamp with the inside of the jaw to the line. Don't forget to account for the metal curve supports we'll be using. It will add another 1/16 of an inch to the face of your jaws. Once the clamps are in place, we'll fasten them to the backing sheet with wood screws. Depending on the curve you're creating and the wood you're using, you might be exerting quite a bit of force to hold things in place. Now that we have our arch defined and our clamps are in place, we're ready for a test run. Here we have our strips of material. We're using birch in this case. These were taken from a piece of solid stock that was this wide. You can see that the repeated saw cuts ate away a lot of material. In addition to preventing clamp bite marks on the face of the wood, these metal guides serve two important purposes. First off, they distribute the pressure from the jaws evenly along the stock so the pieces are consistently glued. Secondly, they act as a sliding plate. We're taking straight stock and curving it, so the wood needs to be allowed to move along the surface as we shape it by tightening the clamps. With our wood slats and metal guides in place, we'll tighten them from the center clamps outward. This way the strips are allowed to move freely at the ends until all the slack is taken up and secured. We'll tighten this clamp fully, which holds the stack in place while we tighten the others incrementally. With the strips secure, we've got our arch and we can begin to see what the finished product will look like. Now if these strips were taller, like an extension jamb for instance, this is the point at which we would add extra clamps to the top of the jaws to ensure even pressure across the width of the jamb, or the height if you want to look at it that way. Any clamp will suffice. All it's doing is making up for the pressure lost as you travel up the jaw. Think of it as a lever that we need to help along. We've gone through the process and everything is worked out, so this time we'll glue it up for real. This is going to take a bit more time, which is why your choice of glue is important. You're adding adhesive to anywhere from 20 to 30 pieces, so planning ahead will save you a lot of trouble down the road. Let's go over some basic concepts. When it comes to working with the Archway system, using a glue that has a long setup time will help you out in the long run. It gives you time to get everything prepared and positioned properly. You'll also want your adhesive to be hard drying, which is to say that it's very rigid and holds tightly once it's completely set up and dry. Depending on the type of wood you use and the severity of the curve you're creating, your arch may want to spring back to straight. Having a nice firm holding adhesive will keep the piece rigid and the curve will lay just the way you had it. Until the glue gets tacky, it can actually act as a lubricant, so occasional light taps with a hammer keep the strips from bulging up out of the flat plane. We want to keep everything flat against the surface of our clamp to maintain a straight curve. Remember that just a little bit of oozing out from between the seams means you've got nice glue coverage and even pressure along the whole piece. We'll let that set up overnight. After giving the glue a chance to set firmly, usually a few hours, we'll loosen our clamps and see what our finished arch looks like. Everything seems to be flat and consistent. Most importantly though, it matches our custom template curve perfectly. This is a piece after it's been milled. To create this profile, we used a simple benchtop planer available at most home improvement stores. Add some stain and a few coats of varnish and you get something like this. It looks like it was created from a solid piece of stock. Thanks for watching this demonstration of the Archway system by R&R Clamp. We covered a lot of ground, from the setup and use of the clamps themselves, to prepping the stock lumber and finding the right glue for the job, to the nature of curves from a more geometrical standpoint. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Remember that for more information about our clamping systems, or to order a kit of your own, visit our website and online store at www.rrclamp.com.